Carolyn Dube here. Oh, what's the play for today? Today I'm playing around in my art journal and, well, there's a little bit of user error that happens. A little bit of a struggle with a pen, a little bit of struggle with patience, and then at the very end I realized there was a message or a meaning in this page that just kind of hit me all of a sudden that probably had been there all along. I was struggling with these pens today, and it's not because there's wet paint on the page. You see, this paint is completely dry. I mean, totally dry, completely cured and everything, because I did it weeks or months ago, and I decided to add another layer to it. But here's the thing. It's been months since I've picked up my Posca pens here, so they're not quite as juicy as what I'd want them to be. So I had to do a bit of pushing the nib down to get that ink to flow again. Totally nothing against Posca. This was completely user error. Now I'm taking this as a reminder that I need to use my pens more often because pens that are used frequently, frankly, do a lot better than ones you just let sit on the shelf for a really long time. And you'd think that was a lesson I'd mastered, but nope, it's one I keep needing to be reminded of over and over again. As I'm using this hash mark stencil here that's created by Mary Beth Shaw for over at StencilGirl Products, I want you to notice how carefully I'm stenciling right now. I'm going in an up and down motion, I'm doing it carefully, and that's going to give me the crispest line. And then my impatience kicked in, and I do more of a side-to-side motion, and that's kind of living on the edge, because when you stencil side to side, you're more likely to get those little bits of paint that run underneath the stencil. But clearly, I'm not concerned about this because I'm totally going side to side here now. And that's why some of those hash marks I did right there, they look a little bit darker, a little bit looser. And that was totally because I was going side to side and I wasn't taking all those hours, would have been seconds, right, to carefully go in an up and down motion. Now you might have noticed here as I'm using Nat Kalbach stencil that I am going in that up and down motion. See, I got that reminder, I got that nudge, I found a little extra patience here. So yep, I mean we're adding all of 2 seconds to this entire process, but for some reason in my head when I'm doing stuff, that truly feels like it's gonna be hours, that it's monumental. Now, am I the only one that feels this way, or does sometimes you get that bit of impatience and just those little extra seconds feel like it's going to take forever? Well, the silliness going on in my head all about my sense of time and my impatience, well, that got me thinking about what I needed to add to this page. I needed to add a little silly to it as a reminder to not take all this stuff in my head so seriously. There are definitely some things that are worth taking seriously in the world and in our heads, but a vast majority for me, I should not take that seriously. Now, you might have noticed I'm using a bunch of stencils here on this art journal page. And the reason why I love using them so much is they're basically a tool that can be used lots of different ways. So when you've stenciled something, if you want to add more to it, make a change to it, that kind of thing, you can simply put the stencil right back on top and get back to work on it. Here I'm using Mary Nasser's World Mask, and I'm simply taking a pen and adding a little fine detail of edging, just a little bit of line right around the edge of it. Oh, and by the way, this is a great way to use stencils even if you don't have paint underneath them. You can just basically get this wonderful line drawing of the stencil simply by using a pen. Now, does that mean you have to put the stencil on there to trace around the edges of stuff to add some lines and details? Absolutely not. If you like to freehand it, you can just go right around the edges of your design this way. By now, you can probably tell that I'm not a big fan of those rules of things that you have to do, that you must do when you're creating, and more about just letting go and enjoying those art supplies. To create the title for this page, I decided I wanted to use a stencil. And I know, not a shock to you at this point in the video, right? But there's a big reason why I like to use stencils for titles, and that is I don't love my handwriting, and I get way too caught up in my head whenever I'm doing that on a page. So I save myself that aggravation, that grief, that frustration, and I use a stencil. This stencil is called It's Time to Play, and it's got a whole bunch of quotes about play on it. And I can definitely use the quotes as they are, but right here, I'm going to take part of one quote and part of another quote, and I'm going to combine them together to get what I want for this page. Now the two quotes that I'm pulling from as they are in the stencil, the first one is, "Getting old is when you walk around the puddle instead of through it." And the other one is, "A little nonsense now and then is cherished by the wisest." And what I'm going to do is pick and choose the words that I want from those to create a different phrase that'll go with the page that I'm doing here. And I love that I have that flexibility, that freedom, because with stencils, you can use them however it brings you joy, whatever you enjoy doing. And so, like with this stencil, there are times where I stencil the entire quote, and then there are times where I just pick and choose a phrase or a couple of words, or even just one word. Now, I haven't talked much about the journal, or really at all, about the journal that I'm working in here. And this is just simply an old book that I liked, and I'm using that as the journal. I didn't prep the pages, I didn't do anything like that. I just turn to a page and then create on it. If I want to put gesso on it, I'll put gesso on it. And if I don't, I won't, because I'm not a big fan of rules and musts and shoulds and that kind of thing. I'm much more a fan of play and letting loose and enjoying and being creative. Now, if that's something that sounds good to you, I encourage you to go check out my workshops, including my free workshop called Permission to Play. And from the title, I'll bet you can guess what that's all about. It's all available over on the website at acolorfuljourney.com, and yep, there'll be a link down below for you. Now, this page really surprised me at this point, where I was putting some stenciled layers on it and just adding stuff to the page. And it wasn't about the layering or the adding, it was about the phrase that I used there, "walk around the nonsense." About this point in the play, it struck me that it has another meaning, and that is to walk around the nonsense that's out in the world right now. There are plenty of things that need to be taken seriously, plenty of things that are important, and there's also nonsense. And it's knowing which stuff to walk around and which stuff to take seriously is really important, especially this year. Now, one of the things I am not going to take seriously is coloring within the lines. I'm putting one of the Marabou art crayons on here, and I'm very loosely going over it, and then I'm going to smear it around with my fingers. I'm not going to keep it perfectly inside the lines. So I'm going to add just a little more pink onto the page, and then I think I'm going to call this one done. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying the fun, I'd so appreciate it if you gave the video a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of the videos, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll know as soon as I've got a new one out. And of course, over on the website at acolorfuljourney.com, you can find all sorts of fun and play. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.